rebuilding. The catastrophic failure, a new start, physically, mentally, our careers, our businesses. Step back, first step, next step. The driver in me just wants to get it done tomorrow. We'll do this, do that, let's move this, where are we at with this? You build some confidence, build some self-esteem, start to feel better about yourself. The Silverback Blueprint Podcast, a show for men over 40. We focus on getting stronger, staying motivated, building discipline, creating a community, and becoming truly happy. Hey guys, welcome to episode 37 of the Silverback Blueprint Podcast. I haven't used that intro in a while. Go back to basics. A long time ago, a few episodes ago, that was our intro. Today, before we get started, something really cool happened the other day. I was walking around in the Home Depot in Canada. So I live in the East End. My business is in the East End of Ottawa. So like Orleans is like a suburb and stuff like that. And I was in Canada, which is like the West End. So, it's like Toronto. It's like, your downtown Toronto versus Mississauga on the other end, that kind of thing. And I was walking around in the Home Depot and I looked over and I saw a couple guys wearing my Hostile shirts. So it was kind of cool. They were the military ones, which is really sharp. And then I went over and talked to them and stuff. And of course, I'm always wearing Hostile stuff. So they're like, hey. And I'm like, hey. And I go, you like the shirts? They go, yeah, I really like them. We get a lot of comments. And they're like, oh, you're the guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the guy. So that made my day. That was pretty cool and stuff. So, thanks, guys. I really appreciate that. They said, one of them said they found out about us from listening to the podcast. And that, they went over, checked the shirts out. They loved the shirts. They train at a gym in Canada. And when they were training, wearing the shirt there, they actually looked over and saw two other guy and a girl wearing shirts and stuff like that. So there you go. We're taking over the world, one T-shirt at a time. So if that's something that's pretty cool for us, I have to admit, it's always great to see your work happening and moving forward. And if you want to be as awesome as those guys were at Home Depot, then head on over to hostilegear.com and use the code Silverback, don't use the S. The S will get you in trouble. Silverback at checkout, and you're going to save 20%. Always got some new stuff happening. That military Canadian powerlifter shirt is definitely by far one of our most popular ones. The hoodies are cool. There's lots of cool stuff. And we're always doing something different, having a lot of fun with the brand and stuff and what it represents. Just guys and girls working on themselves, rebuilding, and just becoming better versions of themselves. So it's pretty cool to see that happening and stuff. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is the beauty of the suffering. And I was thinking about this earlier today. And I talked so we shoot 3 or 4 podcasts. And my first podcast, they were talking about lifting the fog, right? But then the other thing I was thinking about is, how the beauty of the suffering of when we're challenged by something, we're going through it. And I don't mean to be like, insensitive to if you're going through something tragic, don't take it that way. That's not what I mean. However, a lot of people, once they go through huge tragedies, when they come out on the other side, they often find amazing things happened throughout that as well. If you're knee deep in it, it's really hard to see that and feel that right away. So that's, I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's in dealing with our suffering that we really shape and mold our character. It's seeing what life is like on both sides of it. When things are going really well, we never, ever give credit where credit is due. We don't appreciate sometimes the things we have, right? There's that old saying that, there's lots of old sewing too, but there's that old saying, you don't know a good thing, you don't realize how much of a good thing you have until it's gone. And that's very true, isn't it, right? When things are going well, we're caught up in ourselves, we're caught up in what we're doing, and rarely do we take the time to sit back and take it in and appreciate what's happening. Sitting there in an early morning, watching the sun come up, and this is stuff that if you would have told me, when I was like 20, I'd be thinking this is awesome. I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. I'm 20 years old. It's fucking bullshit. Let's go out and, pillage and stuff like that, right? But, now at 49 and having gone through some life and had some, great things happen, had some tragedies happen and stuff in between, obviously we look at things differently, right? And until we go through tough times and tough situations, we won't appreciate the good, not near as much as when we have a point of reference of the bad, of the loss, right? And to me, that's something that when we're going through a terrible situation, if we could stop for a second and sit there and take it in and say, you know what, this is part of life. This is going to be part of my growth. And I'm going to benefit from this. Now, it's hard to say that when you're very emotional and you're going through some stuff. Now, I'm talking if it's like, some crazy shit, like an illness, a death, a severe loss, for sure, right? But I'm also talking about, tough times, tough times at work, tough times at home, tough times financially, things that aren't at the same level as, losing a loved one, but however affect us, right? And sometimes I think they affect us harder in the way that sometimes they can last a lot longer. You know what I mean? If we lose a loved one, it's tragic and we're going to be sad and it's going to break us. But there's a point where we're going to be able to start moving forward eventually on it, right? Because it happened and there's like an end point, or there's a point in which it happens and then everything happens after that, if that makes sense. But sometimes when we're in a situation where it's ongoing, right? An ongoing financial crisis, an ongoing emotional crisis at home, an ongoing issue at work, right? I find sometimes those are the hardest because we get caught in it, we feel stuck in it, and it could last days, it could last weeks, it could last months, it could last years. And to me, those are, I don't know, I'd rather take just a big kick in the balls right now and get it over with, and then, be on the other side of that, than to have someone come over and just flick me in a nutsack 20 times a day, every day, right? I wouldn't let either one happen, but I'm just saying, right? I just think that if I had to choose between the two, I'd take the one-timer, you know what I mean? So I can move forward, right? That kind of thing. That to me is kind of how I like to relate it for, that's how it makes sense in my head. There's a lot of nutsack flicking in my head. So it's like that old joke. You used to do it in high school, and I fucking did it the other day. You walk up to a buddy and go, hey, man, do you have a sleeping bag? And they go, well, yeah. And then you snap them in the nuts, and you're like, well, not anymore. Listen, that was gold in grade 9, and it still works today. All right? Just that, and don't take my word for it. Go test it. All right? That kind of thing. But, it's seriously, it's, we're fucked up sometimes. Anyway, let me just get some coffee here. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, it's coming through, and when you get out on the other side of the tough time or the tough situation, that suffering that you're going through, things look different. Things are different because you're different, right? The world around us doesn't change. Our perception of it changes based on what we're going through, what we're experiencing, how we're processing things, right? And what makes us us and makes us unique and makes us special and allows us to grow is the tough times as much as the good times. Right? If you try to avoid stress 100%, you're going to miss out on so much. And I think you'll have 1,000 times more regret at the end of it, because what if is far more damaging than I fucking did it, or I tried it, or that didn't work out, or hey, it worked out. Right? Or I remember that situation. I remember going through that. It was tough, man. I get that, right? And, this is what I learned from it. And this is the lesson I learned from it. And you just get that. That's what seasons us. That's what gives us some grit. That's what gives us that steely, when someone walks in and you could tell they've been through a bunch of shit and they've come out on the other side, there's a strength to that, right? And often they're the ones we go to for advice in our times of crisis, right? And it's how we handle the things. How we handle a situation in our 20s and 30s and how we handle it now hopefully is improved. And if not, we have to work on improving that, right? So the first time we run into a stressful situation, we may overreact. We may underreact. We may react in the wrong way, right? We learn from that. Hopefully we learn from that. We all have friends and associates and maybe even ourselves in certain situations where we get caught in that fucking cycle, right? We get caught in that cycle. This happens. Oh man, that's bullshit. That kind of thing. I don't ever want to see that happen again. And fucking 6 weeks later, 6 months later, 6 years later, oh, it's happening again, right? We all have that friend, right? That's, it's always, why? And you can always tell that person because they're the ones that are like, oh, here we go again. And I'm like, that's right, motherfucker. Why are we going around there again, right? You need to change that situation. You need to fix that, right? At the end of the day, right, part of making that suffering work in your advantage and getting something positive from it is coming out on the other side a little bit better, a little bit wiser, a little bit stronger, a little bit more human, right? That kind of thing. There's a lot of times we get to situations and we thought, we deal with it. And if I ever face this, I'd be this way. And sometimes we're tested and we realize, you know what? Well, that's not how I thought. That's not how I wanted to deal with it. Or we come through a situation and we sit back and going, wow, I really like the way I handled that. Or someone tells us, hey, I watched how you went through that, and that was pretty impressive and stuff like that, right? So we're always going to get feedback. We're going to get information from it. Don't go out looking for trouble, as they say. But at the end of the day, right, how we deal with the adversity defines us as much as how we come through it, right? To me, it's that old, not if you win or lose the game, it's how you played it. I think that's a big part of it, for sure. And at the end of the day, there's so much power that comes from experiences, good and bad, and they can all help make us better at the next set of experiences, good or bad, right? If we learn from it, we'll learn to recognize the situation sooner, right? The first time you walked down a dark alley and you kind of knew it was a bad idea and you got mugged, right? Oh, you just, got that hunch and you got reaffirmation for that hunch. Ideally, next time you're coming up to a dark alley, you should learn from that. You're not going to do it. Or you've prepared yourself to be much better in a dark alley situation, if that's your thing. But at the end of the day, right, for me, the sad part is when we don't learn from those things, or we don't get the lesson that we could have gotten from that situation. To me, that just multiplies the tragedy that it is, or the stress that it is, or the suffering that it is. That just multiplies it, right? You don't want to go through something for nothing. I think that, to me, is my biggest takeaway from anything that I go through and stuff, is that, I need to learn. I need to take it in. I need to suffer. And, and I'm not saying that you ignore pain, physical or mental. I think you need to take it in. I think you need to own it. I think you need to, be in it so that you can learn from it and that you can appreciate it. That's the human factor as well. Shit, like guys don't cry. Oh, that's just stupid old talk, right? That kind of stuff. But then don't be the guy that cries at everything, that kind of thing. But at the same time, when sadness happens, we need to be sad. We need to take it in, experience it, and deal with it. But then let's not be stuck there. Let's move from there, right? Let's appreciate, what happened and try to understand it and try to, make it work for us mentally. And then at that point, move forward and go forward and stuff like that. So, if you lose a friend or you lose a loved one or something like that, well, ideally you want to come out on the other side of that and remember the good times. Ideally, you want to come out on the other side and also value the other relationships in your lives even more, right? And that's a big premise for us at Hostile, is that, once we're over 40, we're halfway. Almost halfway, if not more, depending if you're 50 or 60, right? And that's really that whole, realization that it's really up to us how we're going to decide how we're going to live and enjoy and appreciate and really benefit from the second half of our life, get the most from it, right? That's up to us. And we need to have that epiphany or that realization. And when people hit that, I find there's that shift, that change that happens to them and stuff, right? Again, someone who's been through stuff, when you talk to them about stuff, they're going to have a very different response and a different point of view and a different perspective. And I find sometimes it's very calming, it's very reassuring, right? Because you just, hey, I get it. I can understand. I feel that you've been through this kind of thing, right? And the way they handled them, it might have been great. It might not have been great. There could have been different ways. I love it when I talk to someone who's gone through some shit and they tell me, here's how I handled it, but here's how I wish I would have handled it. It shows me that they're even more aware, right? That kind of thing. So there's just a lot to be taken from it. And there's a lot of people out there with a lot of experience that have a lot of knowledge to share with us as well too, right? So we learn from what we do, we learn from mistakes we make, but we should also learn from what other people have done and other mistakes that people have done as well. We can learn a lot from that as well too, right? So conversations are so important. Getting to talk to someone is so important about stuff, right? There's been times where I've had, certain things happening for me that I've just had to go talk to someone. Now, sometimes it's someone I respect and I trust, and sometimes it's been a professional, where I sat down and had a couple of sessions and stuff. I go to AA meetings. There's a reason why I do a lot of these things, because it's a system for me to work through the things I have to work through, right? Sometimes I need to talk. Sometimes I need to listen. Sometimes I need to just be around it, right? And I think that's the same for all of us, right? We talk about, on a positive note, the circle of 5, your inner circle, right? But then again, same thing, we're going through tough stuff. When we get to a point that, we realize that we're going through something and, we just can't handle it on our own, I think it's very important that we seek out help and we seek out someone to talk to. We hear all about the mental health stuff and, mental health awareness, and I think it's fantastic, right? If you feel like you need to talk, then do something about it. But then doesn't that come down to taking ownership, Doesn't that come down to, not blaming, but turning around and saying, hey, I want to work on this. I want to try and solve this. I want to try and get through this. So we take the responsibility and we move forward, right? And sometimes it's as simple as looking something up on the interwebs, where to go, where to talk to. Sometimes it's a cry for help, and we hope, we can direct it towards someone who can help us, right? But we got to do something. We have to move something. And most of us are pretty reasonably intelligent to know that we need to do something. However, whether we're willing to take action on it, going back to our 5-second, countdown and stuff like that, take action, right? That's entirely up to us, right? That's entirely how we decide how we're going to handle things and what we're going to be doing. So, when I talk about the beauty of the suffering, that's what I'm talking about, is just that whole, how it plays out, how we play out, how it happens. Just there's so much to be taken from it and so much to grow with and stuff. To me, that's what's beautiful, because that's what's going to just make us better overall. So that's kind of where I was going with that today. Kind of heavy, I guess. I don't know. That sort of just came out today. Weird things happen to me when I'm on the leg extension, I guess. I don't know what it is. But that's what I want to talk about today, guys. Listen, head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. Subscribe if you haven't. Share the podcast. That helps us out a lot. If you have any questions or comments, head on over and email me at kurthaas@gmail.com, and I'll talk to you guys later.